following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Call to order the August 26th meeting of the Cary Town Council. And at this time, I'll recognize Councilmember Bush for our ceremonial opening.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're at now the adoption of the agenda portion of the meeting, and there's an important part of this. The applicant for 21 REZ 04 Wellington Park PDD Amendment Parcel C2 from tonight's consent agenda has requested we remove it from tonight's agenda. It will return to council at the next council meeting on September 9th. So is there a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And we now move to recognitions, reports, and presentations. And we do have a special guest in our audience that I'd like to introduce to everyone. Marshall Hancock from Troop 244 is earning his Citizenship and Community Badge. Will you stand up and be recognized, please? We had a good conversation before the meeting, and he helped me realize that I do a lot more than I thought I did. All right, so we now move to our next item, which is the Cary 150 History Moment, and I'll recognize Councilmember Urhoff for this.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Since a new school year just got underway this week, I thought tonight we would focus on the history of education in Cary. So we're going back to school. Education is vital to the life of any community. This thought was not lost on Cary's founder, Frank Page. Yes, everything begins with Frank Page. What can you do? But this is somewhat ironic in this case because Frank had little or no formal education himself, but his wife, Kate, certainly did. Kate must have had a significant influence upon education in Cary. She was formally educated, proficient in mathematics, and fluent in French. Very unusual for a woman in those days growing up in rural Harnett County. Her influence was definitely evident in her children. For example, her eldest son, Walter Hines Page, grew up to be a journalist, an editor, and ambassador to Great Britain. Son Robert was a U.S. congressman. Son Junius was a banker. Daughter Emma was a college professor. Son Henry was a railroad president. And Frank Jr. was North Carolina's first state highway commissioner. And that's just 6 of her 8 children. Quite a legacy in education and in public service. But back to Frank Sr., who even before Cary was officially incorporated, designated a sizable parcel of his own land for a school lot at the head of Academy Street, of course where the Cary Art Center stands today. That school building, known initially as Cary Academy and later Cary High School, was a wooden, two-story, four-room school built in 1870 as a private boarding school. Parents from nearby towns and even some from out of state began to send their children to Cary Academy. It became Cary's first claim to fame. For example, in 1900, it had 248 students, almost half the enrollment of the entire University of North Carolina. And Cary's population at that time was just over 300. But Page sold 1/3 of the interest in the academy for a sum total of $800 to Rufus Jones in 1873. Then in 1886, he sold his remaining shares to two of Jones's daughters, Sarah and Lulie. Miss Lulie, along with her other sister, Miss Lily, became two of the school's best-known teachers for many years. And if you look close at the picture of the class on the right-hand side, the right-hand person in the front row bears a striking resemblance to Councilman Jack Smith. I assume it's his grandfather. I didn't think Jack was quite that old. Quite that old. But upon Cary's incorporation, Frank and the town school committee divided Cary into two districts, with one single teacher school for white children and another for black children in each district. They were probably not up to the standards of Cary Academy, however. A significant moment in the history of education in Cary occurred in 1893 when Alfred Daniel Buck Jones died because the black school in District 2 happened to be on his land. This allowed Cary's school committee to make arrangements for white children from District 2 to attend Cary Academy so that black students in District 2 could vacate the Jones family's property and move into the now vacant white school that became known as the Cary Colored School. This move really made it necessary for the town to buy the academy the following year. And in 1896 they did, and it was henceforth known as Cary High School. Next year that was important was 1907. It proved to be a pivotal year in Cary. That year, the North Carolina General Assembly agreed to support a statewide system of high schools. Until then, the state had put money into only primary schools and universities. Only days after the General Assembly voted, Cary High School was sold to the Wake County Board of Education, which enabled Cary citizens to proclaim proudly that theirs was the first state-assisted public high school in the state of North Carolina. Since Cary Academy had been expanded many times since its founding in 1870, it now consisted of 4 schoolrooms, 4 music rooms with 3 pianos, a reading room, a library, a literary society hall, 16 dormitories, a dining room and a kitchen, and desks and benches for 150 pupils spread over 4 acres. Moreover, in 1913, citizens approved a $25,000 bond to replace the wooden structure with a modern brick building, which you see pictured here. The state added another $5 grand, enabling Cary to erect what was called at the time the best high school building in the state. That was said by Principal Marcus Baxter Dry, who may have been somewhat biased because he served as an educator for 52 years and spent 34 of those years as principal of Cary High School. Under Dry's leadership in 1913, Cary also became one of the first high schools in the state to offer vocational agriculture and home economics. The school's young women took cooking, sewing, and other domestic science classes, and then practiced their skills in the dining halls and dormitories, while the school's young men learned scientific agriculture and animal husbandry on a 15-acre parcel where agriculture teacher E.N. Meekins taught lessons in a very hands-on manner. People all over the state began to associate Cary with the term high school. Cary had more upper-grade pupils and boarding students in 1913 than any other of the 200 state-assisted high schools. And that barn in the upper right is still there today. While Cary High School had evolved into a campus of modern brick buildings, the Cary Colored School had expanded merely from 1 to 2 rooms, which happened only after Cary considered its 2 schools for black children. Excuse me, there we go. Annie Mitchell Meadows taught grades 1, 2, 3, 4 in one room, while her husband, the school's principal, Reverend John William Meadows, taught grades 5, 6, and 7 in the other room. Several attempts were made to build a better school for black children, but nothing was done until the Cary Colored School burned down in 1935. After about a year, the school committee agreed to build an elementary school and a high school for black students. Can we go back one slide from there? Wanted to show you this picture, which looks sort of familiar, almost looks like the Cary Arts Center today. The main building for Cary High School, which was erected in 1913, had a short life because it was torn down in 1938 to make way for a new $132,000 building, which underwent a renovation and expansion in 2010, so it could all open as our Cary Arts Center today. That building looks almost like the one we have today. But here we go again. We'll move on from this. There you see Kingswood Elementary School on the right-hand side. But built on Farrell Street, the new all-black East Cary Elementary School, which is the picture on the left, had 5 rooms and 2 teachers, Maud Evans and Eva White, when it opened in 1937. Originally made of wood, it was replaced by brick buildings in the 50s, and then in 1969, it became the integrated Kingswood Elementary School, which you see there today. That was originally East Cary Elementary School. The all-black high school became West Cary Middle School after desegregation in 1965. J. Estes Byers served as principal of West Cary High School before desegregation and stayed on as principal after the integration process, which made him the first black principal of an integrated school in all of Wake County. Cary schools today, both public and private, are a source of pride. Schools on all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, have been recognized for academic achievements. High schools have racked up dozens of state athletic titles, and they boast award-winning bands as well. A final thought. Kate and Frank Page, Cary's original power couple, a 6'4" tall, brilliant businessman, and his wife from Harnett County, with a love for education and the arts, founded the original Cary Academy. Today, the existing Cary Academy off of Harrison Avenue was founded by a 6'4" tall, brilliant businessman and his wife, who originally hailed from Harnett County, who has a love for education and the arts, Dr. Jim and Ann Goodnight, who says history does not repeat itself. Clearly, over the last 150 years, the size, scope, and student population of Cary schools has expanded because our leaders and our citizens have continuously recognized that education sustains, enhances, and grows our community, the community we all chose to call home. I want to thank the folks listed here for their help with this presentation tonight and ask you to please visit cary150.org to learn more about Cary's sesquicentennial and how you can participate in the celebration. But that's it for tonight, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Yara. That was a great report, and I especially love the picture of Jack. That was, hadn't seen that picture before.
He somehow gets into these.
I know, every presentation.
Those are good friends. I miss them.
Before we move on, I do, if you noticed, we have 6 council members this evening. I do want to tell you that Councilmember France is recovering from a procedure, and he'll be back at our next meeting, and we wish him well and wish him all the health, the best health in the world. Our next report is from our town manager, and I'll recognize Mr. Stiegel now.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The Lazy Days Arts and Crafts Festival returns to Town Hall campus this Saturday and Sunday. As we have in the past, we'll close Town Hall offices and the Herb Young Community Center tomorrow at noon so that staff can begin setting up for the event. In the same vein, the streets in and adjacent to Town Hall campus will be closed by 12:30 tomorrow afternoon, including North Academy Street. Other town facilities not on the Town Hall campus will be open as usual. We've added hand sanitizing stations throughout the festival this year, and booths will be spaced 6 feet apart. And while masks aren't required outside, we will have free masks available for those who prefer to wear them. Lazy Days has been a hallmark of our community for 45 years, and I want to thank Doug McCraney, Adam Bell, and William Lewis and the team from throughout the organization for coming together to help create a safe, fun, and rewarding experience for everyone. That concludes my report, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Stiegel, and I'm looking forward to Lazy Days, and I hope you will join us. We're going to follow the safety protocols, as he mentioned, and it's going to be a safe, fun event, so I do hope you'll join us. And speaking of Lazy Days, one of the premier moments of Lazy Days is to hear our town crier all the way from Canada. And guess what? He's in our audience right now. And I'm going to recognize Mr. and Mrs. Webster for his presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. I always hear little bits of laughter whenever I refer to the mayor as Your Worship. Yeah, and it comes from Canadian custom. You see, as down here, your judges, and you honor your judges, and you honor members of parliament, and you honor councillors, but we worship our mayors.
Would you tell my wife that, please?
This is the sesquicentennial. May I start with a sesquicentennial cry?
Yes, please.
Oh yay, oh yay, oh yay. My lords, my ladies, all ye in attendance gather round. As the official town crier for the town of Cary, I have an announcement of great importance. I read, Happy Sesquicentennial Cary. Allison Francis Page was a true entrepreneur. He subdivided his property, built industry, encouraged settlers, and had the hamlet incorporated into the town of Cary, named after his inspiration, Samuel Fenton Cary, a temperance evangelist. 150 years later, that entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well in the vibrant, forward-looking town of Cary that we are in here today. On behalf of the mayor and councillors of all the people of the city of Markham, I hereby bring best birthday wishes as Cary marks its sesquicentennial. And may the next 150 years continue to flourish in the same style. This cry cried aloud this day of August in the year of our Lord 2021, God bless these United States of America. It is a little different crying with a mask on. I breathe in, it goes in. And then I try to say something and it sounds as though I have a lisp. So I will try to work through it. It wouldn't seem right for somebody coming from the north in a red suit if he didn't bring gifts. I have no reindeers, but I do have a little red bag here with some gifts in it. And I'd like to present these on behalf of the mayor and council. The first off, if I can get to the bottom, no, it's not a lump of coal. I have here a silver dollar. Now, I realize that a silver dollar is not quite as lucrative in the States because it is in Canadian money, or it's somewhat less, but there it is. It is silver. It's 99.99%, so forth. And of course, it was minted. It has the Canadian maple leaf on the one side and the Queen of England on the other side. And I also have another one here, which is a silver dollar. Oh, there it is. And this one has the insignia on the back of it. It's the Queen on the one side, and it has the insignia of a polar bear, because, of course, that is on our loonies and toonies. The polar bear is one of the things. It's also kind of exciting because Canada is the only member of the Commonwealth with the polar bear on there that has the insignia of the Queen with the bear behind. Okay, I won't tell that one again. But anyway, these are gifts from the mayor and council that I would like to present to you. As a token of our friendship, there you are. I don't know how close we're supposed to with social distancing.
Thank you so much. Please send my best wishes to the mayor and the council.
I will do that, yes, yes. And I also have a certificate here that the mayor has sent down. Would you like me to read it, or would you like to? Okay, all right. It says, the Town of Cary 150th anniversary. On behalf of the members of the Markham Council and City Council, I would like to congratulate the Town of Cary on your 150th milestone anniversary. Since your incorporation on April 3rd, 1871, the Town of Cary has transformed into a hub centered on development, innovation, and culture, making it a thriving, vibrant, and welcoming community. The City of Markham deeply cherishes the special relations we share with the Town of Cary, and I am proud of the strong sister city partnership that has developed over the years. Together, we join in celebrating the 150 years of excellence. Congratulations on reaching this significant milestone anniversary. Best wishes on your future endeavors. And it's signed, sealed, the Mayor, Frank Scarpetti from Markham. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So for you that don't know, and you'll have to help me, was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago that you celebrated the sesquicentennial in Markham?
I didn't know there was going to be a test.
Anyway,
It was 3 years ago. It is difficult because 2020 just sort of disappeared in the middle there. I'm actually only 72 because I don't count last year.
So a few of us went up there to see how it was done, and we got to celebrate their sesquicentennial, and the mayor was so gracious, and so was the council. We had such a wonderful time visiting all their historic sites and seeing how a sesquicentennial celebration is supposed to be. And it was so much fun, and we really enjoyed it. So I really appreciate the council, and you as well, you and Mary, being here and helping us celebrate ours. It means a lot. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. We're glad to be here. And we also, because we are so similar, Cary started with a collection of small businesses and small buildings, started, of course, with Mr. Page. And Markham, it was the same thing, that we are the communities of Thornhill, which was a little burg, and Unionville, and there was one called Markham, Hagerman's Corners, and a bunch of others.
Do you want me to get them?
There's one called Mongolia, but they spelled it wrong, and so it's called Magnolia. But anyway, all these little communities 50 years ago were joined together and incorporated into the town of Markham. So, I'm sorry, town criers don't usually have mics, I'm sorry, yes. And so it has been incorporated, so this is our 50th anniversary of incorporation of the town of Markham. So 150, we watched what you did, and 100 years later, we decided to do the same thing.
Jack
But
can help you if you forget anything. He'll still be here.
he'll still be here, yes. Forgetting is an easy thing to do. Anyway, we have a little book here called The Historic Unionville, A Village Within the City, and it was written by George Duncan, who is one of our historians up there. And I'd like to present that to you, and perhaps you want to put that in the library someplace for people to find out what Markham was about, or that particular little section was about. And
Thank you so much.
well, thank you for having us. You know, I was really disappointed last year when Lazy Days wasn't there, and we weren't able to come down, and I'm glad we were able to make it. They just barely opened the border. We can fly down, but we can't drive down.
Oh, really?
I don't know what the difference is. But thank you very much for having us here, and we're looking forward to Lazy Days.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we do that? Yeah. How about when we do that?
While the mayor's coming back, the town crier will be kicking off Lazy Days tomorrow. And a special shout out to all of our sister city volunteers. When you show up at Lazy Days, visit us. We're in the center, visit the beer garden, and we'll have the displays of all of our different cities and just get to know us all a little bit more.
And he'll do a special opening at the beer garden as well. So if you haven't heard enough of All Yay, that's the place to be.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
it is
it's
out.
Saturday, not Friday, not tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, Saturday. And I think festivities start at 9 on Saturday. Yep. So we look forward to seeing all of you there on Saturday.
Mr. Mayor, before you
yes.
go on, one of the advantages of getting old is that you can forget things and people say, oh, well, that's okay. I had one more gift here to present to yourself.
Gifts just keep coming.
They just keep coming, yes. We have some famous artists. In fact, we have 7 of them, and they formed a group called the Group of 7. And we're clever, you know. And this Group of 7 were a particular type of artistry that changed the way art was done in the New World at that time. This is done by, and I've got to make sure I get the name right here. It's Varley. We have a museum for the Varley collection because he lived in Markham for a good length of time. And this one is called Tree. And it's a tree. But what is important about it is that is an elm. And the elm trees used to be all across Ontario. There were everywhere you looked, there was the landscape. And that's what the Group of 7 did, was to make sure that they were documenting in their style what the landscape looked like before there were buildings and all the rest there. Unfortunately, in the 50s and 60s, the Dutch elm disease came over. You don't see any of these anymore. There are some of them in Alberta, none in Ontario. But there is a print from Markham, from Mr. Varley, of the elm tree. And I'd like to present that to you, perhaps.
Thank you so much.
The page.
Okay, lots of fun. All right, we now move to our third item on the agenda, which is Public Speaks Out. We've included instructions for speaking at this forum online and on the printed agenda. There were 3 opportunities to participate in Public Speaks Out: through written comments, calling in, or attending in person. And if you're here in person and would like to speak, I would ask that you take a seat in the rows to my right that are shown as reserved. Public Speaks Out speakers have up to 3 minutes each for their comments, and speakers may speak on any topic as long as it's not a public hearing. 3-minute time limit will be enforced, not to be rude, but to be fair to all the speakers. There's a timer on the podium. It'll initially be green. When it turns yellow, that means you have 30 seconds remaining. And when it turns to a flashing red, that's the point I'm going to interrupt you. Again, not trying to be rude or mean, just trying to be fair to all of our speakers. To help have an efficient Public Speaks Out, the clerk will summarize the written comments first, then we're going to call on the remote speakers or call-in speakers, and this will be followed by those who are joining us in person. I thank everyone in the audience for understanding and respecting that this is a business meeting. Please don't applaud, make remarks from your seats, or anything else that may distract from this meeting. So now is the time for Public Speaks Out, and I'll recognize the clerk at this time.
Thank you, Mayor. We had 2 written comments that I'll summarize from Anaf and Monica Gupta and Liz Lyons. Both of those comments were related to the Wellington Park and Thurston Drive rezoning, and they both are advocating to keep the zoning in place. We have no remote call-in speakers tonight, and we have several people signed up to speak, and I'll call on those. Our first sign-up speaker is Tony Puccio. Yeah.
My name's Tony Puccio. I live at 105 Kirkfield Drive in Cary, North Carolina. I'd like to thank the council and the mayor for letting me speak tonight on the proposed zoning change 21 REZ 04 Wellington Park. And thank you all, as well as the planning and zoning folks, for the time, talent, and treasures that you've put into this so far. It's been a long process, and hopefully it's coming to closure soon. Dr. Smith is requesting rezoning of this property. He has never met with our community. He states that his goal is to partner with his future neighbors and be an asset to the existing development. I ask the council to hear the voices of the over 375 signatures on our neighborhood's petition opposing this request for change. That represents 98% of the single-family homes in our community and 83% of the total population. We trust in the decision process of the current Cary zoning designation. We trust in the original property owner's purchase decision, and we trust in the current property owner's purchase decision, as well as the vast majority of the current residents who have chosen to live in Wellington Park. Now we need to trust in the Cary Town Council to do what is right, and I truly believe that you will. As our future neighbor, I ask Dr. Smith to honor the promises and commitments that have been made to your future neighbors and develop the property within its current zoning status. If not, then I respectfully ask you to withdraw your request for change. Council, by voting no, you accept the offer of rezoned or not that Dr. Smith made. He said he will develop the property either way. We stand also before you not opposed to change and growth, and our Wellington community has certainly seen its fair share of that. I ask the council to remember this. We do not stand in opposition of a change to the current status as a wooded lot into the original intended developed use, a daycare or nursery. That change would be embraced. Each resident of Cary has made their decision on where to live based on a number of factors, and whether the current zoning was small or large part of that decision, it was undeniably a part of the whole choice. Just like other decision-making factors that could include commute times, work-life balance, school district ratings, and yes, childcare options. I would like to close my time by reminding the council of Dr. Smith's email, and I quote, "Rezoned or not, I will be developing this property. Please take Dr. Smith up on not." Doing so allows Dr. Smith to make the purchase and develop the property. That's a win. The current landowner gets to sell the property. Win. The neighborhood gets a win when Dr. Smith develops the property under the current zoning designation. And the town of Cary and the council get a win with promises made and promises kept. All of these wins only happen when you vote no on 21 REZ 04. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Grace Purtell. Which one? This one. You got it.
All right, awesome. Good evening. My name is Grace Purtell. I relish the opportunity to be kid-free, speaking to adults, and having the opportunity to represent my community. I'm a working mother. I have 2 young girls. My husband and I purchased our first home 5.5 years ago. I live at 127 East Laurinburg Court and love the life that we have built here. Regardless of working in an office or for the past 1.5 years that has honestly felt like forever working from home, childcare has always been a top priority. The thought of having a daycare center within walking distance of my house would be a dream come true. In January this year, the mayor, in his State of Cary address, noted these amazing accolades from the Smart Asset Survey that I wanted to speak to this evening. And it ranks Cary 11th in the United States where millennials are buying homes, as well as Cary ranking first for women achieving success in business. You can now put a face to those statistics because I reside in both of those buckets. The prevailing need for young families is childcare. Don't just take my word for it. In the 5 houses on our cul-de-sac, there are 10 kids under ages 8. It is a circus, but a huge gift as well. 4 of the 5 mothers in our cul-de-sac are working. Our street is not the exception. More younger families are moving into this neighborhood, and access to childcare is an essential component in looking for places to put down roots. I respectfully request that you deny this rezoning request when it is up for review in the coming weeks. Thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Nora Rohim.
Good evening, council members. I'm Nora Rome. I am the HOA president at Wellington Park, and I'm here to respectfully request that you reject the rezoning application for 21 REZ 4 Wellington Park Parcel C. I'm here to ask that you maintain the current zoning status for use as childcare or nursery. This parcel was specifically zoned for childcare usage 35 years ago because the residents of Wellington Park determined that would best serve the neighborhood needs and be an asset to the community, and we still feel that way. We don't know why the parcel has not been put on the market as of yet, or in the past, but I want to clarify that although the board did discuss buying the parcel, we just don't have the extra money, and because we're a 35-year-old neighborhood and have a lot of infrastructure that requires a lot of upkeep. Borrowing the money as an HOA was not an option, and in addition to that, our covenants put restraints on what the HOA can purchase, and it would require 2/3 of a vote of the entire neighborhood, which takes time. I also wanted to point out that the Imagine Cary plan specifically discusses fostering strong neighborhoods in the second section titled Live. Page 19 of that plan, titled Protecting and Enhancing Existing Neighborhoods, points out the challenges of aging neighborhoods. It says, looking long-term, these aging neighborhoods will need maintenance and investment to maintain attractiveness to new home buyers and renters. And also, issues range from neighborhood disinvestment and housing vacancies to redevelopment of lots that is out of character with surrounding homes. Redevelopment and infill development can be opportunities to modernize homes and neighborhoods while also upholding the unique characters and design of the neighborhood. We know that providing a child care option is, as it is currently zoned for, will protect and foster the strength of Wellington Park by drawing in young families with children, and we know this helps to protect the neighborhood from falling into disrepair. Thank you for your attention and consideration of our request to maintain the current zoning status of 301 Wellingborough Drive.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Lynn Yang.
Thanks. My name is Lynn Yanyo, and I live at 310 West Kirkfield Drive, and I'm also coming to talk about the request to deny the rezoning for 21 REZ 04. I was delighted to hear the history lesson that we had, because we're going to talk about history being made and the fact that we can make history now. We have had zoning since I moved in. I was the second house on that street 32 years ago, and I worked with the developer, Pulte, when we did the transition from Pulte ownership of the neighborhood to the homeowners association. I was on the first board, and I'm on the board again because I'm still around. I was super excited when we negotiated that we were going to get a pool, tennis courts, and the town of Cary had bought the land at the other end, and they were going to put in a park, and this current corner piece that wasn't sold yet was going to be used for a daycare center, because I was a working mom, and I planned on having more kids. And so we moved in 1987. In 1990, first kid came, no daycare. But we had a pool and tennis courts because Pulte did that part. 93, child 2, still no daycare. 97, the children now are in school, and I drove 20 minutes to a daycare and 20 minutes back before I could get to work. 40 minutes on one end and 40 minutes on the back end, and no staying late if we needed to, because we had to pick up our children from somewhere. And this is what 30 years later, we're hearing from our neighbors that they're still going through, because we still don't have that. But we do have a park. The park went in 1998, and it's a lovely park, but my kids didn't get to use it. But we're patient in Wellington Park, so we're going to wait for that daycare, because I think it would be a beautiful addition, and maybe my grandchildren will use it. It would be wonderful. So I, again, would hope that you would consider not changing the zoning, giving us a chance. The person who owned this property has owned it for 30 years. We've talked to him in the past, years and years ago, when he said, I don't know what I want to do. Now his estate is handling it, and it's finally become available for a purchase, but that's been during the pandemic. So give us a chance. Let us see if we can get it developed as a daycare before we just completely turn it over into something we can't change after we've done it. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Wilma Slade.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Wilma Slade, and I live at the Woodlands subdivision that runs along the western side of Green Level Church Road. Currently, the Woodlands has 87 homes with 2 access points to Green Level Church Road, one from Ashley Rose Drive and one from Mills Road by way of Timbermist Court. The property to the south of the Woodlands is being rezoned to build 55 homes. There have been several planning meetings for this rezoning. The initial plans called for 2 access points for the rezoned site, one from Green Level Church Road and a second one to Mills Road. At the last planning meeting, it was announced that the access to Green Level Church Road would be from Mills Road only, and access direct to Green Level Church Road is not feasible. The plan now is to have one access point from the rezoned site to Mills Road to access Green Level Church Road. The Mills Road access will be directly across from and in line with Timbermist Court. And it was stated that maybe there would be a second access from the rezoned site further down Mills Road. My short-term concern is having only one access point from the rezoned site will create choke point and traffic flow issues at Timbermist Court for the Woodlands and likely for the new development as well. Timbermist Court is a very short street with almost no length for cars to queue at the stop sign. This will likely cause backup of cars for Woodlands residents back to the major cross street, Piney Gap Drive. I respectfully request that the rezoned site have 2. The last item I have is currently we the Woodlands, the residents at the Woodlands, use both Ashley Rose Drive and Mills Roads to go right and left onto Green Level Church Road. However, long-term plans to expand Green Level Church Road indicate right in, right out only from Ashley Rose Drive and an open, medium, and full access at Mills Road. This would direct more of the Woodlands traffic to Mills Road to access Green Level Church Road.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. I do appreciate you giving us your comments. And I want to know if you're communicating with town staff. You said you heard from
with Anna Ridling and
Okay.
with Mr. Coda.
Very good, because I look forward to hearing why there's not 2 access points too, because that's
Yeah.
usually required.
And
So,
that was my request.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please stay in touch with them, and I'll ask town manager that make sure staff. Yeah,
Okay.
they'll be in touch. Thank you.
That was our last speaker that signed up prior to the meeting.
Okay, very good. So before closing public speaks out, I'll invite anyone who is not listed as a speaker to come forward if they would like to speak.
Hello, Council and Mayor. I'm Betsy Dassau. I live at 104 Woodruff Court in Cary in the Wellington Park subdivision. This is in regards to the rezoning at Wellington Park. I live within 800 feet of the property that's described. I've lived there for 25 years. We are a neighborhood. We look like a neighborhood. The look is important to us. That's at the entrance to our neighborhood. Just like Lynn, when my child was 6 months old, I took him and drove him to Apex, to Johnson Pond Road for daycare, and actually it was Montessori. Then I took him to Holly Springs on Sunset Lake Road for continuing that education. It's auspicious that Ed talked about education. The zoning actually states nursery school on the documents. Daycare is what we've evolved that to be. The property is really very important to us, as it is the entrance to our development. If you look at the Hartswood Montessori School right off of Kildare Farm Road, right downtown here, you can see that there is a difference in the look of a nursery school, a daycare center, than an office building. I realize you have no control over the look of any of the buildings that would be put into that property. But as we've stated before, and staff has also stated, if a nursery school came in and they wanted to build 2 stories, they could. Again, it still serves the purpose that that property was originally designated for. So we ask you, please, leave the current zoning intact, give us a chance to have this say as a neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Statzel. Anyone else to speak at Public Speaks Out? Anyone at all? Seeing no one, will close Public Speaks Out. And we now move to our 4th item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda portion of the meeting. For the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV, we're going to take a moment to review the consent agenda item. Please keep in mind that one vote approves all of these items. On the consent agenda, we have adjustment to adopted meeting schedule, Sear Stone 2021 TEFRA resolution, bid award for the Beaver Creek Pump Station Bar Screen and Odor Control Improvements Project, bid award for I-40 wastewater pump station improvements. At this time, I'll ask the council if they would like any of these items pulled for discussion. If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
There's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And we now move to the 5th item on our agenda, which is public hearings. Same rules apply for public hearings that apply for Public Speaks Out, with one exception. Speakers now have 5 minutes instead of 3 minutes for their comments. Our first public hearing, item 5.1, is 20 REZ 12 Macedonia Place rezoning. Planning Manager Katie Dry will introduce the item. Council will not take action on this rezoning tonight. Instead, it will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board and will return to council at a future date. Ms. Dry.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request to rezone 10.94 acres at the intersection of Macedonia Road and Jones Franklin Road. This site may look familiar to you because it was recently rezoned in 2018 to allow for senior multifamily units. This rezoning will remove the age restriction from the request, as well as several other changes that I will cover in this presentation. Even though the site was rezoned previously, it has not yet been developed. Currently, it contains some detached dwellings on some parcels and others are vacant. This image shows the street view looking south on Macedonia. And now looking at the property frontage on Jones Franklin Road. The existing apartments within this picture are the Franklin Apartments, which are located to the north of the site. Across Jones Franklin Road to the east is the City of Raleigh's jurisdiction. To the west is a mix of undeveloped land and land that was in the recently built State Employees Credit Union. The current and the proposed zoning is the mixed-use district. Mixed-use district zoning districts include a preliminary development plan to be associated with the rezoning. So in this case, even though the zoning district remains MXD, the preliminary development plan that will be associated will be updated. The Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Facilities Master Plan does not propose parks within or adjacent to the site. A street-side trail is proposed to the northwest of the site, which will provide a connection to the Walnut Street street-side trail. And this PDP does include a pedestrian connection to facilitate access to this proposed street-side trail. Go Cary Route 1 serves Jones Franklin Road, and per the LDO, development sites on current transit corridors are required to provide new transit access. The proposal has proposed a transit access location identified on the PDP, and that site will be finalized during development plan review.
I see it.
Cary's GIS maps do not indicate the presence of stream buffers on this site.
But field determination of that will be determined during development plan review. There are no overhead utilities along the site's frontage on Macedonia Road. There are overhead utilities along the subject site's frontage on Jones Franklin Road. Per the LDO, all utility lines associated with development are typically required to be installed underground. However, in this case, during development plan review, staff anticipates Duke Energy will determine that the underground placement of the power lines will be prohibited due to the site's short amount of frontage along Jones Franklin Road. As a result, the streetscape will be planted outside of the power line easements to avoid conflicts with power lines. The rezoning includes a preliminary development plan, which shows that the site will be developed with one multifamily building that will be a maximum height of 75 feet, with surface parking and a stormwater control measure at the intersection of Macedonia Road and Jones Franklin Road, and community gathering of at least 20,000 square feet. This PDP on its face looks very similar to the PDP that was approved in 2018. So I'll go over some of the key changes with this slide. The applicant stated in their justification that as a result of COVID-19, the applicant is seeking to only remove the age restriction associated with this development, and that the physical building contemplated for the property is very similar to what was proposed previously. So some of the changes include the use will be is now proposed to be multifamily. There's no age restriction. Previously approved, there was an approval for age-restricted multifamily and life care community. Previously, the number of dwelling units was 250 dwellings. Now they're proposing 226 dwellings. This is below the threshold for a traffic study that would be required with this rezoning. The building height will remain the same. They're proposing 75 feet maximum. They are proposing to increase the community gathering area from 8,000 square feet to 20,000 square feet. And they're also proposing the same modifications that were approved with the previous rezoning, which includes a reduction in parking, removal of one champion tree, and a waiver for an internal street network requirement. Conditions associated with this request include increasing the planting size within the streetscape, variations of roof style and pitch. The stormwater control measure will include sidewalk connections and a decorative fountain. The community gathering area will be at least 20,000 square feet and will contain 3 amenities that would be selected from a pick list. There would also be 5 electric vehicle charging stations. There are 3 modifications proposed with this site. These modifications are similar to the modifications requested with the previous approval. First, a modification is to remove a 54-inch water oak from the site. The applicant's proposing to remove this tree due to the location of their stormwater device. In return for the removal, the applicant will be required to plant replacement trees per the LDO. They've also proposed to increase their planting standards within the streetscape. The second modification is for parking. They're proposing 1 space per bedroom, plus for visitor parking, 0.1 spaces per unit. Staff's analysis is that the proposed rate is in line with the recommendations of the parking study that Cary recently completed for multifamily development, and the 1 space per bedroom. And we also note that the additional 0.1 spaces per unit for visitor parking would likely be sufficient to provide adequate visitor parking. The applicant has also committed to the installation of a pad for a future transit stop, and that could help support a slightly reduced parking ratio. The third modification is for a waiver of the requirements for an internal street network. With the proposed modification, drivers will still be able to navigate from Macedonia Road to Jones Franklin Road, as shown on the PDP. However, they would be traversing through a parking lot instead of through a street network on the site. Staff believes that alternate design considerations could be explored to meet the intent of the LDO for an internal street network connection requirement. For example, structured parking would use less land for parking, would allow for the design of the street connection within the site. The applicant has stated in their justification that the requirements for a street network would invite pass-through traffic. Staff also notes that traffic calming could be employed to address this concern, and that the promotion of street connections within a destination center could help achieve the plan's vision of interconnected development. Staff's preliminary review of this case with the Imagine Cary plan finds that the following chapters apply, including policies from these chapters, and that includes the live, work, shape, and move chapters. The Imagine Cary plan defines destination centers as being Cary's premier mixed-use centers that contain integrated mix of commercial uses, office, higher density residential uses arranged in a walkable pattern with an active pedestrian realm where buildings front streets. Because this site's located within a destination center, staff's preliminary analysis notes that destinations do allow for higher density housing, which is what they're proposing. However, it should also allow for mid-rise office and mixed-use developments. There is an opportunity for a future transit stop with this location, so this furthers some of that, those policies. The building height that's being proposed for this site could be between 3 to 5 stories. That is within the range of building heights that would be encouraged within a destination center. Destination centers do encourage structured parking. This particular site has surface parking and it lacks structured parking at this time. The applicants have proposed several architectural conditions which could help to further and maintain Cary's attractive appearance. And then lastly, the applicants have proposed the modification to the street network requirement, and that could impact circulation on the site. When looking at the live chapter, we note that within 1 mile of the site, the current housing mix includes 58% multifamily. We should also note that this site is on the edge of Cary's jurisdiction, so this also pulls data from the city of Raleigh and Wake County as well. We also note that multifamily housing within a destination center could be an appropriate use type. It's also near transit, retail, and office locations. There was a neighborhood meeting on February 3rd, 2021. There were 5 attendees who attended this virtual neighborhood meeting. They shared some questions about the change in use that's being proposed and the timing of the project. Since the site has been advertised for a public hearing, staff has received emails and phone calls from 2 nearby property owners who had questions about the timing of the use and the proposal. Notification for the public hearing was sent to property owners within 800 feet of the site. This exceeds the town of Cary's requirements as well as the state requirements for mailed notice. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant's representative is here in the chambers to share their remarks. Following that, in the public hearing, staff will be available for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dry. At this time, I would invite the applicant forward for their remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Dry, for your presentation. Good evening, Mayor and members of the Town Council. I am Neil Ghosh with the Morningstar Law Group at 112 West Main Street in Durham, and I'm here tonight representing DeWitt for this proposed rezoning. Mr. Dry's presentation did a great job going over the basic information for this request, so I wanted to try to focus on some of the more specific details about the case. First, I want to say that we do recognize that a request to eliminate a commitment to age restriction probably sounds quite odd. We understand that aspect of this request is not the best aspect of it, but that's exactly why we've added several other commitments to make this project truly special in the town of Cary. Obviously, removing the age restriction does not prevent elderly folks from living here. Instead, it opens the realm of possible tenants to include folks who are younger than 55. Before I talk about the other changes to this request, let's talk a little bit about what is not changing. The use still will be multifamily. I know Ms. Dry's presentation touched on the fact that 58% of the housing within a mile radius of the site is multifamily, but that's not surprising. I think that stat probably would ring true for a 1 mile radius around most multifamily communities because they are denser and a more efficient layout than single-family housing. And after all, this is a destination center, which is the most appropriate designation for multifamily in the town of Cary. The height also remains the same. In fact, the layout, shape, and mass of the building all remain the same. And also, we're not asking for any additional minor modifications than were granted previously, though the requested parking reduction is worded slightly differently because town staff has indicated that the town now prefers a per bedroom parking ratio rather than a per unit metric. I will note that the minor modification to remove the champion tree is as a result of the health of that tree, and there was a tree report about, an arborist report about that, you might recall, or it's probably in your package as well, but just wanted to clarify. So let's get to the good stuff. What did change? We have dropped the total number of units from 250 to 226. We've also increased the committed community gathering space from 8,000 square feet to a minimum of 20,000 square feet. And not only that, we also have committed to having a mix of certain amenities within those community gathering areas: swimming pool, outdoor kitchen, gaming lawn, really a number of things that they plan to put on the site. We have committed to increase the caliper of trees required within the streetscape at time of installation. In fact, so as to provide a more natural look, we've committed to 30% of those trees being installed at a 3-inch caliper, and then another 30% being installed at a 2.5-inch caliper to give it some variation, but to also provide a much larger tree at initial install. We've committed to architectural details in the roof line so that you will not see one huge massive roof that you might see on other apartment communities. We have committed to a covered vehicle entrance at the front door, kind of like something you'd see at a nice hotel. And we've committed to a minimum of 5 electric vehicle charging stations. But perhaps the most significant enhancement to the project is the commitment to make the stormwater facility a beautiful public-facing facility. It will feature a decorative fountain and paved walking paths that connect to the public sidewalk. And I don't want to oversell this point, but this is pretty innovative. DeWitt has reimagined a piece of necessary infrastructure and is committed not only to making it the centerpiece of its development, but also a public-facing amenity. Oftentimes, the aesthetic of stormwater ponds is an afterthought, if it is even thought of at all, in developments. But the natural slope of this site is towards the intersection, so the best spot for the stormwater facility is right there out in front. No one wants to look at a dirty pond all day, and DeWitt is going to make sure that no one has to at this site. The project is going to be a very nice multifamily community appropriately located within a destination center, and you have to keep in mind that the current zoning already allows for more multifamily than what we are now requesting. I think the additional commitments make this project that something special that many of you have often expressed a desire to see, and truly this will be a very nice, well thought out, well appointed, beautiful multifamily community in the town of Cary. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts about the request. Our team is available to answer any questions you may have, and I thank you for your thoughtful deliberation tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. There were 3 opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, to get comments into the meeting tonight through written comments, calling in, or attending in person, and those instructions were posted on public notice online and on the printed agenda. And so at this time, I'll open the public hearing for 20 REZ 12 Macedonia Place rezoning and call on the clerk to see if we have written comments.
No written comments, no remote speakers, and no one has signed up to speak.
Okay, I'll invite the public, for anyone here that would like to speak on this rezoning, to come forward at this time.
Was that the original?
Yeah, that's their website. That's their website.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Andy Pettish of Pettish Law, 127 West Hargett Street. I'm here on behalf of Bell Crossroads Limited Partnership, which owns the Franklin apartment homes immediately to the northeast of the subject property and adjoins that northeast property line. I want to share a few of their concerns. There's one I think that is based in kind of the health and general welfare of going forward with this rezoning request. And then the other two are more pragmatic about how the property would be developed as they've proposed it. So first, the removal of this age restriction is significant. That was and I've gone back and looked through. I know Mr. Ghosh has lived this for a long time. He had represented the applicant in 2017, 2018, and here again tonight. I have been playing catch up over the last month, but I've reviewed the staff report from 2017, the public hearing, the planning board meeting, and the vote finally, and then again analyzed this application. And it appears that it was the age restriction which induced this council in large part to approve that rezoning due to this issue of saturation with multifamily. Now, of course, there is some bias here, at least would be perceived from my client having multifamily right next door. There's some self-interest there. I would leave that for you to assess my comments fairly and see if they apply or don't apply, having acknowledged that factor. Again, looking at some of these, some of the points that were made before, Mr. Ghosh had indicated in the minutes from the public hearing in 2017-18 that the proximity to retail locations makes this parcel an ideal space for senior housing. It was in the staff report reviewing the Cary community plan that says with respect to the locational guidance for senior housing, the policy intent identifies appropriate locations for senior housing as being locations where the proximity of such housing to services and amenities is of high importance, and that housing for seniors and others who have mobility challenges are encouraged to occur proximate to transit to improve mobility options. Those factors are present in this location, and it's why it made this location particularly attractive for this kind of development and made an exception for having another multifamily residential community, in this case age restricted. There were options for it to be
I'm sorry, I've got to stop you. You've
I thought
exceeded the time.
That was 5 minutes already?
Was that 5 minutes or 3?
It was 3. Two more.
Oh,
okay. All right. Thank you.
I was
Thank you very
thinking the
much.
same thing. I was like,
I know I can be loquacious, but that even surprised me. And so, and again, at that time when that rezoning occurred, these properties were residential, zoned at that time residential, multifamily, and office institutional. So they would not have been able to do this at that stage. They needed it to be zoned mixed-use development. And this project does not have any of the other characteristics of office commercial that's included with this proposal. Again, it's been noted that 48% of the housing in this area within half a mile is multifamily, 58 within a mile. And as is noted in both applications, age groups over 55 continue to grow in this area. COVID was noted as a reason potentially to change this, but I would suggest that having that elder generation in proximity to younger people who are not getting vaccinated, it doesn't make it clear that that is a sound reasoning with respect to that. I want to jump ahead to the other 2 points here that I'd like to make. One is the parking modification. There is access here would be going through, there's a cross access into Franklin, and if the parking ends up not being sufficient, it's very likely that that overflow is going to come into, and they're going to be looking for additional parking in the Franklin apartments, and I think that that's a concern. In addition, this reduction in housing, Mr. Ghosh just noted a drop in units and characterized it as being good. I'm not exactly sure why that's good, because this is a destination center. Density is kind of encouraged. But what that drop did was put them just below the TIA requirement. And as the staff report notes, that leaves some information that's missing from this application. And then finally, I would note that the application indicates on the north side there's a 40-foot type A buffer that's going to be included. that's really the northwest side. The northeast side between these properties only has a 20-foot buffer, which may be okay because there is a 40-foot type A buffer, but there is no screening plan in that area, and I think that there should be some additional screening in that case. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I apologize for the timing mix-up. Okay, anyone else to speak at rezoning request 20 REZ 12 Macedonia Place rezoning? Seeing no one, will close the public hearing, and I'll give my comments. Since the applicant's looking for feedback, I tend to agree with what was just said. The significance of that senior housing was a big deal to me, and I'm concerned about the loss of senior housing. Looking at what's proposed, the street network argument between Jones Franklin and Macedonia, that doesn't hold water with me at all. I know that area very well. Nobody's going to cut through there at all, right, Jack? That's ridiculous. So that's a bad argument. I would like to see a street network. I would like to see the buildings closer to the road than the parking on the inside. I don't want to look at parking. So those are things that concern me. Personally, I've advocated for a housing mix. I would love to see affordable housing in this as well. Some of the things I'm looking for. So I'm looking for a compelling reason. The compelling reason I heard was COVID-19. COVID-19 makes everything difficult. That's not a reason for me to, that's not the compelling reason for me to change the zoning. So I'm looking for a compelling reason. So that's my feedback, and as you go forward with this, please keep that in mind, and we'll hear from the rest of my colleagues and see what they think. They might have issues with this one.
Well, I'll just comment, not really that I have issues, but I do really like the fact that the community gathering area has been up to 20,000 square feet, which I always think when people come in with these 4,000, 8,000 square foot, community gathering areas, I mean, it's going to be like, what, 3 people hugging each other? I mean, it's like so tiny, right? So it's nice to have something that's about half acre large for a community gathering space, and the treatment to the stormwater pond, I think, is wonderful. I mean, I think those are real benefits. I don't really see people trying to cut the corners. That they're not saving much by going through this community. That's not really a big issue to me at all. As far as the affordable housing, there's a lot of different ways to attack affordable housing. One of them is supply. And what we're seeing here when we talk about 58% of the housing in this area being multifamily means that you have a lot of supply. And that's going to keep the cost reasonable for a lot of people. So in that sense, I kind of like it. I think it's an organic manner of addressing affordable housing that works. It works in a lot of places. So I'm not as concerned about losing the senior housing because I know it's not like it's prohibiting seniors from living here. I guess the question was it going to be a unique enough community for senior housing that we're really losing a major asset from our community by losing that component? And I'll be thinking about that. But some of the compensation that's been given, I think, is very positive for our community.
Okay. Other comments?
Oh, I'm not going to repeat, but I'm just going to kind of raise my hand so that you see that there's more than one council member that cares about something. So I totally on board with what you said about, making the stormwater an amenity, but I'm also in line with the mayor that the parking on the street with having the buildings moved closer to the street would be where we're going. So seeing the parking from the street. I'd love to see structured parking. I mean, this is a great opportunity. 4 years ago or 3 years ago when this first came to us, structured parking and our kind of shift around climate change and impervious surface, things have shifted, right? That's why the electric charging vehicles in this is great, but I think there's more. I also agree with the internal network being kind of bizarre, and the comment that you would put traffic calming in an apartment parking lot seems odd to me. So, and I do see the connection between the two apartment buildings being somewhat odd, right? I see the reason for it, and the connectivity is important, but forcing one development to take on the burden of less parking, It makes sense when it's a grocery store or school, when you have different shifts of parking or office, but everybody's going to be home at the same time for 2 apartment complexes. And I agree with the mayor and disagree with Councilmember Robinson. I do think it would be nice to see more affordable housing offered as part of this. I'm still on the age restriction. That came in just 3 years ago as being a really important thing. That's what got my vote on it, looking back at it before we came here today. So I would need to see some reason, some compelling reason, I think is the term you used, to remove that restriction.
And I don't want to be repetitive either. I agree with your comments, Mayor. I think most of these conditions that are listed on the screen are excellent conditions, but the sticking point is the removal of the senior housing, of the age-restricted housing. I know that's why I voted for it also 3 years ago, and I suspect the need for senior housing has only increased in the last 3 years instead of decreasing. So I have a sticking point there that's going to be a problem for me to approve this.
Other comments?
Yeah, I just want to express my shared concerns with Mayor and Lori and that have been said, that I'm concerned about the loss of senior housing. The age-restricted senior housing is very important, and we will see an increased demand in our town. So I'm very concerned about that aspect, and I really appreciate all the conditions that are being offered. These are definitely like a plus, but so far that I'm not convinced that that will be good reasons for approving this project.
Mr. Smith, it's your district.
Thanks for reminding me. No, it's kind of fun listening to the beginning here. It's like when you were talking, I'm going, yeah. And you were talking, I'm going, yeah. So, no, I think the big disappointment is it screams of bait and switch. It screams of losing the senior housing. At the same time, if you're going to do that and you want to mute that scream that I'm hearing of bait and switch, then I think you really have to have some exceptional conditions, and I think you're on a good start with the things you've said. But this is an area that is in need of a good visual treatment. So the whole idea of having the parking in the front is probably the one that's most compelling to me. I do like that it's a little less dense. And I'm just going to kind of watch this one go through. I think I don't want to repeat all the things that's said, but it's just like going to the optometrist, do you like one, do you like two? I think there's a little bit on both sides here that I hope you're listening, and I hope that you'll kind of take some of this feedback and just kind of gen this up a little bit to deal with that compelling argument of why we would want to give up the senior housing. That's my thoughts.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Seniors are not prohibited from living here.
Right.
No.
So,
Right, but they get, a senior community, a senior apartment complex is going to have handbars, it's going to have wider hallways, it's going to be handicap accessible, it's
Okay.
going to be made for age-restricted environment. It's going to be built for people, actually my age now. Right? I mean, it is,
yeah, okay, that's a good point. I was trying to figure out what am I missing here that, in this sense, but okay, that's a fair point.
No, I think if we go back 3 years, I think the discussion is that whole area, Raleigh around us, is just overwhelming us. And we had that discussion with Dellinger and all the others that are in that area. So, I think there's some merit on both ways here. And I think what I applaud is there's a lot of good conditions there. I just hope they take another look at that configuration, and they look at maybe how they can make that a little bit more pleasing.
Okay.
My thoughts.
Anyone else? All right. The next step for this rezoning proposal is to go to our advisory board, the Planning and Zoning Board, for their review and recommendation, and it will return to us at a future date. Thank you, Ms. Dry. We'll now move to our second public hearing, 21 REZ 08, the terraces at West Cary rezoning. Senior Planner Aaron Puckett will introduce the item, and council will not take action on this rezoning tonight. It will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board and will return to us at a future date. Ms. Puckett.
Thank you, and good evening, council. This is a request to rezone just under 12 acres located at the northwest corner of Morrisville Parkway and NC 55 Highway. If this site also looks familiar, that is likely because this same assemblage was the subject of a 2018 rezoning request to zone a portion of the property for general commercial conditional use and the remainder for R8 conditional use to allow detached dwellings and a number of commercial uses, including car wash, vehicle filling station, restaurant, and office. That request was withdrawn in June 2019. The subject property is an assemblage of 3 parcels fronting Morrisville Parkway and NC 55. The Blakely subdivision is adjacent to the majority of the property to the west and north, with the Sedgefield subdivision also adjacent to a smaller portion of the western site boundary. There is an existing landscaping business located on the 2 parcels which have frontage on Morrisville Parkway. This is a view of the site in relation to NC 55 Highway looking north. As you can see in this image, there are no overhead power lines along the property frontage. New power lines for the proposed townhouse development would be required to be located underground. However, as you can see, there are power lines which cross NC 55 to a pole on the site, and it is possible that this existing pole at the corner of the site could remain pending approval from Duke. According to Cary's GIS, there is a stream buffer which crosses portions of the site. Field determination of such features is required at time of development plan review. Both NC 55 and Morrisville Parkway are identified as 4-lane median divided thoroughfares on the future roadway widths map. Morrisville Parkway is currently a 2-lane median divided roadway. Go Triangle Route 311 serves NC 55 adjacent to the subject property. This is a peak period route which runs between Apex and Research Triangle Park. Per the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan, Cary requires a street side trail along the property's frontage on both Morrisville Parkway and NC 55. Portions of the assemblage are currently zoned Office Research and Development, Office and Institutional, and Residential 40. And the applicant proposes to rezone the property to transitional residential conditional use. The applicant has offered several conditions. These include limiting the uses to townhouses and neighborhood recreation, limiting the units to a maximum of 60 or just over 5 units per acre, providing a minimum of 4,800 square feet of community gathering space, which is double the LDO requirement, providing private rooftop areas for each unit, which will be a minimum of 250 square feet in order to accommodate seating or other amenities, wiring garages for all units for 60 amps in order to make them electric vehicle charging ready, and ensuring no townhouse units will be built in the northernmost portion of the site as shown on this map. Live, work, and shape policies of the Imagine Cary Community Plan are relevant to this request. The proposed use, townhouses, would be a somewhat unique housing type in this developing area, as detached and multifamily dwellings make up the majority of the existing and proposed housing units in the vicinity. Townhouses may also help support the work policy of providing housing options to support a sustainable and diverse workforce, especially given the proximity to RTP. Regarding the shape chapter, the site is an infill property bounded by NC 55 and Morrisville Parkway to the east and south, and existing residential development to the north and west. Commercial uses are proposed or existing to the east across NC 55 Highway. And recently approved PDDs to the south and north may provide future assisted living and multifamily housing respectively. The proposed use and density also appear to provide a reasonable transition between the adjoining mixed residential Blakely neighborhood and a major intersection. Conditions to provide usable rooftop space for each unit, electric vehicle-ready wiring in all garages, and community gathering space that exceeds the LDO requirement could also help assure a certain quality of development. The Future Growth Framework Map designates this site as being within a mixed neighborhood. These areas support a variety of housing types within approximately 2 miles of Research Triangle Park. While mixed neighborhoods also emphasize master plan communities of varying residential types, the infill nature of this site and proximity to RTP could support a townhouse development. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held in June, and 18 nearby residents attended. The primary concerns were about the width of existing and required buffers, whether a greenway connection of some kind would be required, traffic impacts, particularly where road connections are required between Blakely and the proposed development, the potential height of the proposed units, existing drainage issues in Blakely and whether this development would exacerbate them, and the ambiguity of the actual layout of the site at this stage. Staff received 5 emails and 3 calls since the neighborhood meeting. These included questions about the proposal and next steps in the rezoning process, as well as additional concerns regarding drainage, buffer widths, and loss of vegetation, and the required street connections. And I'll note that these comments do not include any public hearing comments we've received for tonight's meeting. Staff mailed public hearing notification to property owners within 800 feet of the subject site, which exceeds both the state's and Cary's LDO requirements. This concludes my presentation. Glenda Topp, the applicant's representative, is calling in remotely this evening to speak to you on the applicant's behalf. Following her comments and the public hearing, I'll be available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Puckett.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This is Glenda Topp with Glenda S. Topp and Associates, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the applicant, who is also the developer. And I do want to thank the town for having a remote option for tonight's meeting. I want to thank Ms. Puckett for her thorough job of explaining the specifics of the proposed rezoning. She provided an excellent overview of the rezoning case. I would like to focus on several items that we believe are important to the proposed rezoning. As pointed out by staff, the request is for transitional residential conditional use, with the proposed uses being townhomes and neighborhood recreation. When the property for the Blakely subdivision came in for rezoning, it was approved with the exclusion of the parcels that are currently being considered for rezoning tonight. These parcels and the owners had no objections to being included in that rezoning. With the decision not to include the property owners were left with a challenging situation given the configuration of the site and the location of the properties adjacent to NC Highway 55 and Morrisville Parkway, with the potential limitation of access points. These 3 parcels have 3 different zoning classifications: ORD, O&I, and R40. The ORD and O&I zoning districts are not conditional use. Therefore, any of the allowable uses found in the ORD and O&I districts can be built on these parcels without a rezoning. I'm sure you all know that many of the uses that are found in the ORD and O&I zoning districts are not compatible with the existing residential development that is in the surrounding area. Also, access is challenging, and the parcel fronting NC 55 highway is long and narrow, making a portion of it undevelopable. As Ms. Puckett pointed out, we do have an exhibit that shows where our development is planned to stop. This rezoning covers all 3 parcels, allowing for a cohesive development to occur, and if approved, a use that is more compatible with adjacent development. This addresses one of the policies found in the Cary Community Plan: support and facilitate redevelopment and infill development. This rezoning will allow the property to redevelop in a way that is more compatible with existing development. The Blakely subdivision was approved providing access points to these parcels since they were not included in the rezoning. Access is shown to both Morrisville Parkway and NC Highway 55. These connections were provided for future development of the property. It was clear that all 3 parcels would develop at some point in the future. The current Cary Community Plan designates the property as a mixed neighborhood development category, which is categorized as moderate housing. Uses found in the predominant use category include single-family attached townhomes and multifamily large and small. Townhomes are being proposed in conformance with the Cary Community Plan. I also want to point out that prior to the Cary Community Plan, the adopted land use plan for this location identified the parcels as medium-density residential, which again is very similar to what the current land use designation is today. The maximum density allowed under TR zoning is 6 units per acre. This rezoning limits the townhomes to 60, which is a little over 5 units per acre. Given the location of the property adjacent to NC Highway 55 and the Morrisville Parkway, we believe the proposed use and density is appropriate. Buffers will be provided, which will be in addition to the buffers that are approved as part of the adjacent developments. I want to close by briefly discussing the proposed units themselves. The developer is going to speak during the public hearing and will address the proposed units in more detail. Each unit will have an individual private rooftop area accessible by stairs that is a minimum of 250 square feet and accommodates seating and/or other amenities. The developer feels that this area can accommodate this type of townhome. We worked with staff on the wording of this condition to ensure the specifics of the rooftop area. We believe that these units will reach a diverse population, thus providing more housing choices for all residents, which is another policy found in the Cary Community Plan. This rooftop space is in addition to the community gathering space being provided, which is greater than what is required in the LDO. And lastly, the developer does recognize the changing patterns of people today and offered a condition that all units would be wired for electric vehicles. In conclusion, we believe that the proposed use with the associated zoning condition is appropriate for the location and complies with the goals and policies of the Cary Community Plan. The developer has taken these 3 parcels and is proposing a potential development that we believe will be a positive addition to this part of Cary and will blend in with the surrounding development. I do want to point out again that the owner and potential developer of the property and the design engineer are present in the audience to answer any questions that you might have. And also, I want to conclude by saying this is the beginning of the process. I know you are going to hear comments from the adjacent property owners, and we want council to know that we are committed to working with the adjacent property owners to hopefully come up with a solution to their concerns. And thank you for listening to me on the telephone.
Thank you, Ms. Top. All right,
You're
now's
welcome.
the time for rezoning proposal 21 REZ08, the terraces at West Cary. I'm going to call on the town clerk, who will summarize written comments first, then call on remote speakers, and we'll follow that with those who are in the audience who wish to speak in person. Ms. Johnson.
We had 4 written comments from citizens. Margaret Allen commented that the development would destroy wooden open space, may create drainage issues, and increase traffic in the area. She also had concerns with potential height of the townhomes and the road connections between Blakely and the adjoining property. Marjorie Ginsburg commented that she supports the proposal, including the road extension to give access to Morrisville Parkway. Hugh Scuffield commented that he had traffic and safety concerns, particularly with potential cut-through traffic facilitated by the required road extensions, and also commented that an additional dense residential development was undesirable. Mike and Jolene Smith commented that they felt the proposed development would increase noise and traffic and impact the aesthetics of the area, and also had concerns about the required road connections. And then we had no remote speakers, and nobody signed up to speak.
Okay. At this time, I'll call on those who are in the audience who did not sign up, who would like to speak. I would invite the first speaker forward.
And Mayor, I apologize, we did have 2 sign up to speak, so we can call
very
them.
good.
Hi, everyone. My name is Garang Gala, and we are the developers and asking for the rezoning. I live in the town of Cary. I live one light down from here at the Oaks at Sears Farm. And my parents immigrated here in 1989 when I was 5 years old to this small town of Charlotte, North Carolina back then. I've lived in North Carolina my whole life, went to undergrad at UNC, went to School of Science and Math, made Cary my home since 2015, and bought a home in West Cary in 2018. We had an opportunity to develop this project when we sold a piece of property that we could 1031 into. We feel like, as you've seen in the whole area, there are a lot of larger national developers. A lot of people talk about buy local, go to your local brewery, support local. Well, here what we're saying is also support your local builder and developer. Our plan is to use a home builder, townhome builder for this site that's local from the area that everyone knows. And a lot of the area, it's going to be a unique townhome product, similar to what you would see in downtown Raleigh, downtown Charlotte, Durham. They're going to have rooftop access, a modern design, and they'll be fairly larger units. We feel that this is something that is lacking in the area, especially with Apple coming in, Google coming in. The hyper growth that we're about to see, similar to what you've seen in Austin, Texas, Denver, Colorado, those other cities, if we don't get the densities that we need, it's just going to cause the price of housing to go up tremendously. Even some of the comps in the area of the homes, many of the homes have sold well over $1 million, which just 2 or 3 years ago were 600,000, 700,000, 800,000. My home personally that I bought for $490,000 today would sell for $750,000 just 3 years later. And if we don't keep this density, you're going to see the same problem of all these people leaving California happen here. One of the other big things, I think, as many of you know, because of the last recession, the FHA has said we are 4 million housing units short in this country. A lot of that is in the Southeast, Texas, and the Southwest, because that's where everybody's moving to. I think there's a stat that there are like 58 people a day moving to the Triangle. And so to help with this hyper growth we're going to see from 2021 to 2031, I think projects such as this one and other projects will ease that housing burden and not price people out of the market. So once again, like I said, you shop local, you go to your local breweries, help out a local developer. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, next speaker.
Yes, Patricia Bergamasca.
This is a petition that we put together. Okay, my name is Patricia Bergamasco. My husband Vior and I live at 2909 Hampton Hedge Lane in Cary in the Blakely community. We moved to Cary in 1994, and then after 17 years here, in 2010, we retired at the beach. With every visit to Cary over the next 10 years, we came to realize how much we missed it and what a better fit it was for our way of thinking. We admired the progressive leadership of Cary and its culture, the controlled growth, the total regard for the environment, the greenways, the preservation of trees and green space, and the quality of drinking water, all making Cary an ideal place to live.
So we moved back to Cary this February, and that's why I'm up here today. Needless to say, we were very disappointed when we heard that an application for rezoning to accommodate a 60-unit townhouse community to be developed right next door was received by the town of Cary. We are asking you to consider the adverse effect this project will have on our neighborhood. The removal of the tree canopy coverage would create enormous undesirable effects on our community. The trees block much of the highway noise. They filter highway pollution and dust from our air. They cool the summer air and beautify our surroundings. They control flooding. They provide a habitat for birds and wildlife that connect us to nature. This town is all about the environment and has even adopted the slogan, "Carry It Green." The Arbor Day Foundation has designated Cary as a Tree City USA for the past 34 years. The terraces at West Cary will take away the last tree canopy cover in our quadrant of the city. Traffic and safety of pedestrians are major areas of concern. This project will open up our streets to the likelihood of 120 automobiles driving through our neighborhood daily, as well as the direct access to Highway 55, exposing us to many more vehicles, possibly creating a cut-through into our community, polluting our air with noise and emissions, potentially decreasing our property value. Blakely is a 55-plus community where many of the residents have settled here to find peace and tranquility off the beaten path during their remaining years. Residents would have to endure another 2 to 3 years of construction disruption with heavy equipment noise, construction crews, mud on the streets, and the smell of diesel fuel in the air every day. Isn't it enough that council recently approved Carpenter Fire Station, PDD, a 300-unit housing development in the adjacent block north of us that will eliminate another urban tree canopy nearby and cause multiple disturbances to our community during the construction and after? Please consider the impact this project will have on the citizens of Blakely and surrounding neighborhoods. From recent discussions with my neighbors, I know my opinions are shared by many who could not attend this meeting or write letters and emails. I've handed you a petition that a group of neighbors circulated door to door to oppose this project. Out of 150 residents that we were able to contact, 97% eagerly signed it. I hope what I say here today makes a difference and ask that you put yourself in our place and consider disapproving the terraces at West Cary rezoning. Thank you for your service and continued support of our communities.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else signed up?
We have one more sign-up speaker, Jean Joe.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor and Council Member. My name is Jin Zhou, a resident of the Cary and Morrisville since 1996. My wife, Han Lee, and I moved to Blakely from a nearby neighborhood with over 1,500 houses last April. We moved here to enjoy our 55-plus active living lifestyle, the security and the tranquility of the relatively small community, the master living space without stairs. Here, we do our daily routine exercise by walking along the quiet streets. We meet neighboring couples, walking slowly, shoulder by shoulder, and hand by hand. There are families have their physical challenges, members who like to sitting at their street-facing porches. We all enjoyed the climb around and the green belt on the edge of the Highway 55. Unfortunately, as we could see, all areas are losing the nature piece by piece steadily. Blakely was already surrounded by a number of the townhouse projects in the north, northwest, and the southeast. The density of the area development becomes increasingly high and critical now. We believe this rezoning would be so distressing for our neighborhood based on the result of the door-to-door visiting that we did with our neighbors. Among the 150 residents we met, 145 residents, or 97%, are in favor of opposing this rezoning. We are very disappointed, uncertain, and anxious. Some seemed vulnerable. We will lose the safety and the tranquility forever. Our aged neighbors will no longer be able to walk around the narrow streets without fear. We will suffer some additional 120 rolling vehicles through the neighborhood on the narrow streets that are so close to the every houses. We will be sleepless. This rezoning will eliminate the last piece of the tree canopy that symbolizes our motto, "Cary it green," on the front of the West Cary. We sincerely appeal our council members to make your better judgment to maximize the benefits of the preservation of the nature and the balance the proper land development to ensure the quality of the living for our aging fellows in the Blakely. Finally, we would like to call our city planners for considering designing a greenway around the lands for a few surrounding subdivisions. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Any other sign-in speakers?
No other sign-up speakers.
I would invite anyone at this time to come forward to speak on this rezoning that is not signed up, anyone at all. Seeing no one, we'll close this public hearing and then open up to the council for comments. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. First of all, I want to ask Ms. Puckett, the current zoning today is O&I transitional and R40 mix?
ORD, ONI, and R40.
Yes. And what that means is someone today can develop that property, take those trees down, and there's not a thing we can do about it. They have that right. So the question we're asking or answering is not, can development occur, but what type development is best to go on that land? That is what the question is for us to decide. We do not have authority to tell a landowner he cannot develop his property. That authority does not exist, and that's not what we're asking. So trees can go down. The thing we can do is when they take trees down, make sure that there are buffers, make sure there are trails, make sure there are other trees planted, make sure there are a lot of things that protect our environment. So that's kind of where we are and what decision we're making. So what goes there? That's a good question. So what we did about 5 years ago is we asked all the citizens in Cary to come up with a plan. We spent 3 years doing this. And then we had 30 citizens condense that plan into decision points. And that's when the council got involved. So the plan we follow is not a council plan, it's not a staff plan, it's the community's plan. And so if somebody proposes to change a rezoning, they have to follow that plan. And that's what staff was talking about when they were talking about the chapters. How you live, how you play, all these things, there are chapters in that plan that our citizens created. And that's what this rezoning is about. So I wanted to make sure that everyone understood that this is not a decision on whether to cut down trees or leave them. That is not the decision we're making at all. And so having said that, that sounds very blunt, but our goal tonight is to hear your concerns, and we value those concerns. They're very important to us. That's how we make our decisions. We have facts. We have citizen input. We're going to send it to an advisory board made up of citizens. They're going to give us their opinion. And all of that together will come back, and then we'll make a decision. So that's what we're getting ready to do, and that's the process we're involved in. So for you to be here tonight says a lot, and we're very thankful you're here. We're very thankful that you gave us your opinion, because it means a lot in the process. If no one shows up, we only have one side of the story, and we don't know what everybody is thinking. So thank you for being here. Now, I'm going to open it up to my colleagues. It sounded like I ranted and raved, didn't I?
No, you're just good information. It's good information.
So I'm going to give my comments, what I thought, and these are my personal comments about what I thought about the proposal. One, it's right next to a major highway. It's very intense there. I am concerned about buffering the neighborhood. That is a very big concern to me. I think that mix is an appropriate use. I would like, Ms. Top said she wants to talk to you. I would like that to happen. I would like her to sit down and talk to you, and let's talk about details that concern you. Maybe it's height. I think I heard height, noise, traffic, those types of things. She can sit down with you and talk about those things, and that's very important to hear about that. So I think it's an appropriate use. I want to know about the buffering. I want to know about some other things. I like the fact that they're preserving the northern part of that. Of course, that's a weird triangle. I don't know how they would develop that, but that's good. And I like that the density is not too intense. They could go higher. Believe me, we're seeing a lot of intense developments, as somebody noted, up in Carpenter Fire Station. That was an intense development, and that was hard for me to take personally. But those are the types of things I'm thinking about and looking at when I'm looking at this. I'm also looking at, you'll hear from council members, affordable housing. You'll hear about the environment. I did like what I heard about the wiring for electric vehicles in every unit. That is a very big plus. I really like that. I think that's great. But as we go through this process, you had the public hearing tonight. You can come to every council meeting and speak at Public Speaks Out about this issue. So make sure if you have additional comments, you either come, you can call in, or just send us an email, because we want to know, as you're going through this process, as you talk to Ms. Top, what you're still thinking and what questions you don't have answered and what concerns you. Those things we need to hear. So I feel like I've talked for 30 minutes, so I probably should stop and let my colleagues talk.
This is Miss Robinson's
Actually,
district, is it? Oh, wait, no.
it's Miss
Not, that's right. It's changed.
Miss Lou.
It's Miss- Councilmember Lou.
It's right by Highway 55 and Morrisville Parkway. I think transitional housing is appropriate for that site, but I do share concerns that it's a single-family home neighborhood, and you wanted to keep it consistent. And for, the original zoning allows office and development and R40. So, I mean, I would like to see office. Anything changing from office to residential, you know, I would want to ask questions. But I can see it's at a site that's transitional housing is appropriate.
So you brought up one thing, and I promise I'll be quiet after this. The R40 is very important to understand. That's basically a 1-acre lot. And when somebody gets annexed into the town, they have to have a rezoning. And so we give them R40. That's what that is. So we don't really intend somebody to build on a 1-acre lot there. That's just a placeholder, which kind of forces them to come in, because the Cary community plan doesn't call for 1-acre lots there. So just to further that, thank you for bringing that up. I forgot all about that.
I have just a couple of questions rather than comments. What are the densities for the adjoining communities, Blakely and
That's a good question,
and
too.
the other one north of that?
That is a great question. I have that in my notes. So Blakely is around 2.97 dwelling units per acre, so it is lower. That is a predominantly detached development, but also does have townhomes. And then Sedgefield, which is the development that you see here in the PDD zoning, that's kind of on the southern, southwestern boundary, that is 3.39 dwelling units per acre.
Okay, and another question. The access for the development, obviously, there's the one to the connected community. Will there be a access point to 55 and Morrisville Parkway, or maybe a right in, right out, or?
So very preliminarily, but since this has not yet gone to development plan, obviously, from speaking with transportation, we believe that they could get one access point on NC 55, probably not two, so both of those connecting streets couldn't go all the way through, but they could connect, or one of them could cul-de-sac. It is likely they could at least get one access point on 55, and my understanding from our transportation staff is that would likely be only a right in, right out, because that's probably what NCDOT would allow for there. And yes, they could also have an access on Morrisville.
They could. And the current ORD, there's a mixed ORD, R40, that's not highway zoning, that's an odd one. When they were annexed, it just went to R40, it didn't stay as highway zoning like a lot of places are on Highway 55?
That would be county though, right? That's a county, the highway
Is it
zoning.
annexed? It is part of Cary?
So the two parcels that front Morrisville are actually in the municipal limits, whereas the triangular piece that runs along NC 55 is in our ETJ. So it actually does have our zoning, but it's in our ETJ.
I see. So the kinds of things that could be in the ORD were like manufacturing, telecommunication, warehouse, distribution. So that could be built today without, us being involved at all. So this is kind of like the, be careful what you wish for, right? They could build something like that, or maybe as very concerned, engaged homeowners, you could get something better, right? So this is an opportunity to have that discussion. I think it's an important thing to weigh, right? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
I would say this council meeting, of all the meetings that we've had recently, would be a great one for civic students to look at. I mean, really, there's, all the cases before us have been kind of like, this is good, kind of pros and cons on both sides. The interesting thing, to the residents who are concerned about this project is to look at what Wellington was communicating. They weren't saying that they wanted to keep that lot trees, just trees. They said, we like the fact that the current zoning is what it is. And what we're hearing on this site is people are like, I love the trees. We all love the trees. We wish we could keep trees everywhere. Unfortunately, North Carolina doesn't give us the permission to restrict people from developing their land. So in fact, they ensure the right, they guarantee the right for people to develop their land. And as Lori and Harold have said, this is zoned for ORD. It seems like my recollection is within the last several years, we've had a car wash and maybe gas station proposed for this corner.
Right.
So I really think that the residents need to think about the existing zoning and then compare that and say, would I want that to be developed this way?
Right.
Or do I want it to be developed as single family? Now, we all have our preferences. I personally would probably like to have single family next to me versus a car wash, but, because, weird lights, weird sounds. But I think there's some things that the applicant can do that would help shore this up and give greater confidence, because change is really, really scary. And it's a terrible feeling when you don't know what's coming. And you see these beautiful trees and you're like, well, geez, what's this going to look like? Is this going to be like complete asphalt and, and so forth? So here are some thoughts that I have, my observations. I think 60 units is a little aggressive. I think you might want to consider that. I think you really need to articulate what your buffers are going to be, especially along 55, because it's really awful to have residents that are like right up against 55. I would say my least favorite project in Cary is the Brickyard. I really, really do not like the Brickyard. If you drive north on 55 and you look at those homes and how they look right up against 55, that's not what we're shooting for. So you'd be well served by giving some consideration about your buffers. There was a comment about ambiguous design. And I think that's really where a lot of the uncertainty is coming in here, is because the neighboring residents and the council members don't have a sense of how you can take this really, really wonky site and put 60 units on it. What's it going to look like? How's it going to feel? What's that street layout going to be? I would point to what I think is an excellent example of development that's happening right now, and that's Avi Singh Development over on Cary Parkway, at the corner of Evans and Cary Parkway, where the architecture looks so great. And I'm not saying go replicate their architecture, but they're putting in four-sided architecture. And what I'm saying there is that there's no ugly side to a building. If you're building on a corner of two major roads, you have to give consideration. If you're putting residential in there, you have to give consideration. And I think you can do conditions if they wanted to regarding four-sided architecture, right? So, so anyway, those are my observations on this. I mean, I remember when Blakely came in, and I thought it was a travesty that this triangle wasn't included in it. But they obviously didn't want to do it because it wouldn't be lucrative for them. They were going to, if they brought it in, we'd say, put a buffer in. So that's why they didn't, there was no incentive for them to kind of pick this up. But anyway, I think this project, with the right conditions, could take away that ambiguity, give people confidence that's going to be an enhancement to their existing neighborhood, maybe over a car wash or a gas station. And it could be a real nice amenity for the community.
Any other comments?
Well, this is truly infill development because it fills in every little available space.
Yes, it does.
That's there. But the way I look at it, it's better than the current zoning, and it's certainly better than the car wash. And I certainly would encourage Mrs. Top to work with the homeowners. There's a lot to be said for this, but I can understand people living there not wanting townhomes right next to them. So we'll see what happens, but I think there's a lot of talking that can be done yet.
Okay.
Well, one of the things I enjoyed listening to is the whole argument of local. I didn't really need the tutorial about what's going on in the market across the country, but my only encouragement to the applicant is, stay focused. You are local, so get to know your neighbors, and you've heard the stuff. I'm not going to repeat it again. I think you're onto something, but see what you can do to maybe work a little bit closer. Giving some definition to what you're doing is the way to get that peace of mind. And I enjoyed the fact that you said you came here in '89, and I've been listening to people talk about those developments in 1989. So when you were 5, so I'm glad to see that you've grown up and that you're a builder now. So, thank you for coming. But I really did enjoy the whole idea of the local. I think that's a good balance, and I like the idea that if you are local, I think you're more prone to have the pride in your work and to want to be a good neighbor. So those are just my observations.
Very good. Any other comments? All right, so as I mentioned, the process, what's happening next is it's going to go to our Planning and Zoning Board. And what they're going to do is review it and see if it matches the Cary Community Plan, and they'll vote on a recommendation to give to council. That meeting will probably happen in a month or so, and it will probably come back to us, I'm guessing, 3 months. I'll look around. All the staff members are dodging me. Okay.
Nobody's making eye
Nobody's
contact with you.
committing. Everybody's looking at. It'll be about 3 months. So again, you have plenty of time to interact with the applicant, with the staff, with the council, and we're all here to work with you, to answer your questions, and get anything answered you want to get answered before we reach a decision point. And the good thing about this council is we've got 100 years of experience or more, and we've heard it all, seen it all, so we will be glad to listen to everybody up until the last minute. We don't make decisions until we get to this table, and I can honestly say that's true. Some council members will be leaning one way or the other, but they'll hold their decision until everybody said what they had to say and all the data and the information is in. And that's the good news about this council. So no decisions made until the night we get here and we vote on this. So there's plenty of time. So please, I encourage you to be involved in anything you want to know and get involved in, just let us know. We're going to help you with it. Okay, and thank you again for being here. All right, that is the end of that rezoning public hearing, and we'll move to our third rezoning public hearing, and that's 21 REZ 06, McCrimmon Parkway and Lewis Stevens Drive rezoning. Ms. Katie Dry will introduce the item, and council will not take action tonight, and it will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation. Ms. Dry.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a request to rezone a property at Lewis Stevens Drive and McCrimmon Parkway. The property consists of 3 parcels which front Lewis Stevens Drive. The McCrimmon Parkway extension will traverse through the southern portion of this site. The existing zoning is R40, and the applicant has requested to rezone to the Transitional Residential Conditional Use Zoning District. Proposed conditions include limiting the uses to townhouses and detached dwellings. There will be a maximum of 160 dwellings on the site. Of those, up to 15 of the units may be detached dwellings. There's no minimum associated with the detached dwellings. Architectural conditions have been proposed so that at the time of installation, all units will include a front-facing entry, a 2-car garage, minimum roof pitch requirements, gable roofs with front-facing gables. And also, at the time of installation, all units will include at least 2 materials from this pick list below on the front elevations. And that includes cementitious siding, brick veneer, stone veneer, shake siding, cedar shingles, and board and batten. The applicants have also proposed a concept plan as a zoning condition to accompany their request. This includes the location of the future McCrimmon Parkway extension, the Aidenbrook Drive extension, which will connect McCrimmon at the park to the north to Cedar Bend to the south. It also proposes a connection to a greenway easement on the northern portion of the site and a stream buffer on the western portion of the site that's currently in existence. This concept plan also identifies a streetscape buffer that will be along the southern portion of the McCrimmon Parkway future extension and a 30-foot buffer between the site and the neighborhood to the north. According to Cary's GIS maps, portions of the site are impacted by stream buffers, but field determination of that would occur at development plan review. And according to the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan, the planned Kit Creek Greenway extends along the west side of Kit Creek. Although the Kit Creek Greenway connection or corridor is located on an adjacent parcel, a greenway connection from this site to the Greenway corridor will be required at the time of development plan. According to the transportation plan, Lewis Stevens Road and McCrimmon Parkway are both thoroughfares. McCrimmon Parkway currently stops at Lewis Stevens Road. The McCrimmon Parkway extension will be located on the southern portion of this assemblage, and the applicant will be responsible for constructing a 4-lane divided roadway. In 2019, Cary conducted a feasibility study for the McCrimmon Parkway extension to identify and examine context-sensitive design alternatives consistent with the vision and goals set forth in the Cary Community Plan. This study included multiple opportunities for public input, including both an open house and public comment period. We should also note that the conceptual design from this feasibility plan is reflected in the applicant's concept plan associated with this rezoning. The McCrimmon Parkway extension will ultimately extend from Lewis Stevens Drive to NC 55. There are presently no overhead utility lines along the site's frontage on Lewis Stevens Drive other than one power pole delivering power directly to the site. Per the LDO, all utility lines will be required to be installed underground. Staff's preliminary review of the Imagine Cary plan finds that policies from the Live, Work, Engage, Shape, and Move chapters are applicable. We note that the site is within the mixed neighborhood development category on the Future Growth Framework map. This is a slightly zoomed out view of the mixed neighborhood development category. It's intended to encompass neighborhoods and housing in the northwestern part of Cary's planning area, specifically located within about 2 miles of Research Triangle Park. And of course, this map showing Cary's future growth framework map shows the location, which is just south of Highway 540 and RTP, and it's east of Highway 55. Mixed neighborhoods are intended to have a substantial variety in housing types, unit sizes, lot sizes, and densities. A virtual neighborhood meeting for the proposed rezoning was facilitated by planning staff on June 2nd of 2021, and according to information submitted by the applicant, 14 nearby property owners attended and participated in this meeting. Questions and concerns expressed at the meeting included interest in the Greenway connection to the future Kit Creek Greenway to the west, buffer requirements adjacent to the Cedar Bend neighborhood, timeline for construction, and the proposed mix of uses. Since the public hearing was noticed, we did receive email correspondence from one nearby property owner. Notice of the public hearing was sent to property owners within 800 feet of the site, and this exceeds both the town of Cary's LDO requirements and the state requirements. So this concludes my presentation. The applicant's representative is here in the chambers to speak with you about the applicant's request. And following the public hearing, both staff and the applicant will be available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dry. At this time, I'd invite the applicant forward for their remarks.
Good evening, Mayor Weinberg and members of council. I'm Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant, Tri-Point Homes. Also with me tonight and available for questions are Bob Davenport of Tri-Point, the developer, and Adam Ashball of ESP Associates, the civil engineer on the project. Katie did a great job with the presentation and kind of orienting you to the site, so I'll focus on the ways this rezoning will benefit town residents and embody the goals of the community plan. First, the rezoning will help create a mix of housing types in the area by allowing additional density on an infill site. This is consistent with both the property's future growth framework designation and several policies in the community plan. The mixed neighborhood designation recommends the TRCU zoning that we're requesting and calls for a mix of housing types, including townhomes. Live Policy 2 states that housing should accommodate a variety of lifestyles, households, ages, cultures, market preferences, and incomes. Live Policy 5 recommends residential development on infill sites that is designed to acknowledge the context. Although it's a little odd, this is actually an infill site with fully developed neighborhoods to the north and to the south. Adjacent to the south is the Cedar Bend neighborhood, which is a single-family detached subdivision that was built in 2014, and I think there are about 37 homes there. And then adjacent to the north is McCrimmon at the Park, which is a mix of single-family detached and townhomes built in 2007 and 2008. So the requested zoning will facilitate a mix of housing types by allowing townhomes on a centrally located site. Second, the request will allow additional residential density to help meet rising housing demand in West Cary. The site is located just 2 miles from Research Triangle Park, and with additional businesses moving to RTP, housing demand will only continue to rise over the next several years. Third, the project will involve the extension of McCrimmon Parkway along the southern boundary of the property and the extension of Addenbrock Drive, consistent with Move Policy 4, which says to focus transportation investments on bridging connectivity gaps. And you can see both the McCrimmon extension and the Addenbrock Drive route on the concept plan that's still up. And as you can see on the aerial of the property, the logical extension of McCrimmon Parkway across Lewis Stevens Drive would ideally traverse both the subject property and the Cedar Bend subdivision to the south. You can kind of see on the right of the graphic here that it doesn't line up exactly where we're proposing it. And Cedar Bend was developed in 2014, and I think the study for McCrimmon Parkway wasn't completely finished, and so no right-of-way was dedicated on the Cedar Bend subdivision side. And so for that reason, this project will be dedicating right-of-way for the entire McCrimmon Parkway extension, which we estimate will be about 4.5 acres dedicated as public right-of-way. And like I said, there are, what I think is kind of unique here is that you see the connection of two stub streets for Addenbrock Drive. I know, oftentimes they're required and they sit as stubs for years, and here we have the opportunity to connect both stubs from the north to the south of the site, which will help improve connectivity through the development and along Lewis Stevens Road. Fourth, as shown on the concept plan, this project will involve dedication of greenway easements and connection to the existing Town of Cary Greenway easement corridor to the northwest of the property. And this is the Kit Creek Greenway corridor. And, we think this will really help facilitate a well-connected greenway network in this area, since the town already has easements indicated by the kind of yellow lines there through this corridor. And eventually, the greenway will connect with internal sidewalks in this proposed neighborhood, which will connect to McCrimmon Parkway. And, this site is only a quarter mile from McCrimmon Corners, which includes, I don't know if you're familiar with the shopping center, but there's a Harris Teeter, there's several restaurants. And so once the greenway is done and this project is completed, we think it's a good opportunity for residents to be able to walk or bike to restaurants, the grocery store, and to the other existing neighborhoods to the east of the site. And finally, the offered rezoning conditions will ensure compatibility with existing uses and help preserve neighborhood character. We've offered some architectural conditions that Katie mentioned that require every townhome to have a front-facing entry, two-car garage, front-facing gables, gable roofs, and a mix of building materials. And I think it reads 2 of cementous siding, brick veneer, stone veneer, shake siding, cedar shingles, and board and batten. TriPoint has already built a couple of townhome communities in the area. If you want to get an idea of the quality product that they build, the towns at North Salem and Apex, and also Waterside, which is located on Jones Franklin Road and backs up to Lake Johnson. And we've also included a density limitation to ensure that the intensity is appropriate in this area. And like Katie said, there'll be a max of 160 total dwellings and also a max of 15 detached dwellings. And the idea there is that we anticipate this will be a townhome project, but wanted some flexibility, with to allow a few single-family detached dwellings if appropriate. So in sum, we believe this request is in the public interest because it will add high-quality housing stock to the area on an infill site to help meet rising demand. It will facilitate the extension of McCrimmon Parkway and Addenbrock Drive, and it will promote walkability and alternative modes of transportation by connecting to the Cary Greenway system. So thank you for your time, and we're available for any questions.
Thank you. Now's time for public hearing 21 REZ06 McCrimmon Parkway and Lewis Stevens Drive rezoning. I'm going to call on our town clerk to summarize the written comments and then call on remote speakers. And we'll follow that with speakers who have signed up to speak in person. Ms. Johnson.
We had no remote speakers, no written comments, and no one signed up in advance.
Okay. I'll invite anyone in the audience that's here that would like to speak at this public hearing to come forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and open it up to council for questions or comments. I went way over on my last comment, so I think I'll just be quiet this time and let you have it.
You don't have an audience either.
No. Scare them all away.
Right. No, I mean, no one came to speak,
Right.
so, right, yeah. I'll make some
Okay.
comments. I'm not opposed to townhomes. I just think that there's a lot to be figured out here. This, kind of like the last one, it's somewhat ambiguous, even though it's a nice rectangular lot, that's nice. But, I'm kind of curious, we don't often see a cap on the number of detached homes. That's kind of interesting. I'm kind of interested in this fact that there's great stipulation about one side of the unit. We're trying to really get away from these units that just have one pretty side and 3 other sides. So, I think maybe the applicant might want to reconsider that. Because this is right up against another major road, McCrimmon, we're going to be very curious about the buffers and what kind of accommodations are made for that. And then, I understand that's a big commitment to dedicate the public right-of-way, but that's part of the, that's what's known when purchasing this site. That influences the value of this site, the price that the person can get for it. What I haven't been able to discern from this is really what kind of sense of place. This is a fairly large community, especially in these days for Cary, which has such small parcels left. What is the sense of place? What is the community gathering area? Where are people going to go so that they don't just pull into their two-car garage and then never come back out? Why will people walk around this, and where will they congregate? I don't really see any kind of stipulations about that at this point. So those are things that I'll be looking for. One thing, if you haven't developed in Cary before, you can build out the greenway and count it towards your park requirement. So that might be something that you want to consider, because we do want our greenway network to be built out. It's, when we do surveys of our citizens, the greenways are typically the favored park amenity, so that's something to consider. But those are just my observations on what I'm looking at here.
Okay, very good. Other comments?
I have a density comment. I think the density seems really packed in for me. 160 units on 30 acres. And we already know that part of that 30 acres is going to include a pretty big road and a designation for right-of-way for McCrimmon. So it's really not 31 acres, it's significantly less. So that density, that 160 is pushing how I feel about it. I'd also like to see some additional detail. I think, Councilmember Robinson, you're exactly right. We normally see so much more detail so that we can get a sense of what this looks like. I don't see a lot of mention about what you're doing from an environmental perspective, and some of the other things that we've been talking about at the table. So I'd like to hear a lot more.
Any others? All right, this will go to our Planning and Zoning Board, and we'll see it at a future date. Thank you, Ms. Dry.
Thank you.
We now move to our last public hearing, which is 21A11 Life International Annexation, and Senior Planner Aaron Puckett will introduce the item, and we may take action. Ms. Puckett.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a request for annexation of 18.6 acres of property located on the west side of Green Level Church Road, north and south of Fussell Avenue, and just east of Alston Ridge Middle School. The annexation also includes approximately 1.5 acres of intervening area, which in this case is the area within the adjacent right-of-way of Green Level Church Road, for a total of just over 20 acres. The area is contiguous to Cary's corporate limits and is within the ETJ. The property is zoned transitional residential conditional use based on rezoning case 19 REZ 21 approved in May 2020. The annexation is associated with a development plan that proposes to subdivide the property for development of 90 townhouses consistent with the approved rezoning. The plan is in the review process and based on the provisions of the LDO can be approved administratively when staff determines the plan meets all applicable LDO requirements. In accordance with the ordinance, the property must be annexed before the development plan can be approved. Following the public hearing, council may take action on the request. And this concludes my presentation. Following the public hearing, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Puckett. Now's time for public hearing for 21A11 Life International Annexation. I'm going to call on our town clerk to summarize any written comments, call on any remote speakers, and we'll follow those with speakers who have signed up to speak in person. Ms. Johnson.
No written comments, no remote speakers, nor did anybody sign up to speak.
Now's time for anybody here that would like to speak at this public hearing to come forward. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions, comments, or a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the annexation.
There's a motion.
I'll second.
And a second. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is unanimous.
We're still here, we promise.
That concludes the public hearings. We have no discussion items. We do need to go into closed session, and I'll recognize Councilmember Bush for a motion for us to go into closed session.
Pursuant to GS 143-318, 11A1, 3, and 4, I move that we hold a closed session to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the town, including an agreement of a tentative list of economic development incentives that might be offered by the town in negotiations, to consult with attorneys employed by and/or retained by the town in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the town. And among other things, council expects to hear advice concerning the following lawsuits: James Gill versus the Town of Cary, case number 19 CVS 4627, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to the law of the state and not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the general statutes, and that's new.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we are now going into closed session. reconvene our council meeting. Our business has been completed, so I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.